Oops. Can you hear me? Yeah. So this is the boat that I take when I have to go to work, and I'm going to take you to a trip there. So when I was a kid, my grandma used to tell me about her life in the forest. She lived there for 40 years, and she would tell me how the forest was a resource for her, for food, for medicine, for education. And also, she would tell me about her encounter with the spirits of the forest. So I was always amazed about reasons and explanations about the nature. My father was the last one to be born in the forest, and she would have the help from midwives, indigenous, and sometimes with no help. He was the 17th, so she delivered 17 babies, yes. Besides all the happiness and the beautiful story, she would tell me how sad she was being in the forest and not having a proper life and a formal education to her kids. So after some years, I think many years, she convinced my grandfather to move to the capital to give a formal education to the kids. So in 1953, she decided to move from the Amazon by boat to the capital, Rio, at that time. And in that experience, during that, before traveling, she didn't have the 7 kids anymore. So in total, she had around 10 kids traveling with her. When she arrived in Rio, she saw a big building, and she thought that the building was her house. So all the kids would go and knock on the doors. Actually, she didn't have door back home. She saw a beautiful place to plant cassava. That was what she used to eat. So for her was, okay, I have this big building, like a castle. I have this grass to plant food. She brought with her pig, chickens, parrots, and also 2 dogs with her in the boat. But then, at some point, the neighbors start calling her wild people. So she realized that her life would be resumed in a 50 square meters apartment, and she could not plant anymore. They said, no, this is not a place. This common area is just for the tree and the grass. And my father, at the age of 13, went to a boarding school where he would have at least access to food, education, and clothes. So my father, he believed that formal education was a better solution. And that way, I grew up thinking the same. So for 15 years, I worked with web development, believing that was the best way of being happy. But in 2012, I quit my job, and I decided to go back to the Amazon to try to find my grandmother's life. In my visits, I could find this man and think that, wow, I remember my grandma telling me that she didn't have doors in her house. So, yeah. And no running water, no sewage system, no access to telephone signals, no internet, no public services to transport herself and the kids. So they didn't have access to schools. So it's a very isolated way of being. At least he has a satellite dish there, but my grandma didn't have. So after 60 years, after my grandma moved, I could still see her life in other people's life. In 2015, I found this community, Acará, and they were planting cassava, growing medicinal herbs, and they would build their own tools, and I thought it was very similar to what my grandmother would tell me. So I decided to stay there, and I lived many months and connections and trying to understand what was happening to them and if they were trying to move also away from the forest. And what I learned from elderly is that moving to the capital was the best option. So everyone had the same idea as my grandmother, and they were sending their kids. They also complained about not having internet or cell phone coverage because they would have, when there is an accident, there is no way of calling help. And when they have kids go back to home, they do not have access to internet to do research. And also for their business transactions, if they want to sell their products, they would have to travel to the capital to have access to internet. So I started paying attention to the way they were using their communication skills. This is Wanda, and she's in the middle of the road waiting for the cell phone coverage to work. She sells cosmetics through WhatsApp. She used to sell cosmetics in a catalog paper, but now she's taking pictures and sending through WhatsApp. So that she discovered that that specific place, she would have internet access. So she would stay there every afternoon. Her sister, Vanessa, she found this spot in her house where she would put her cell phone and wait for the orders to arrive. This is Dona Lucia. They built this hill so they could have access. So it's in a rainy day, and she was calling the doctor to make an appointment. And this is Antonio. He has in his hands a credit card machine, and he has a business, so he was waiting for the signal to work so the transactions could go to his bank account. It's also interesting sometimes to see in the middle of the forest a chair. And the reason is because that place maybe is a place where you can sit and wait for the internet signal to work. So they also facilitate your work, and you have a chair, and they don't miss the localization where the internet can work. So talking with the leaders and the leader of the organic producers, his name is Po, we decided that maybe a community network would be a good solution for them. I was trying to understand, like, how can we make people to stay in the community in a different way as my grandma and my father. So we found this tower in the harbor. It was abandoned, and we decided to invade it. So we contacted University Federal University of Pará, and also a university from São Paulo. And we collaborated. We got a signal, internet signal. We got some equipment and some learnings about how to build a community network. But we also would like to understand what were their skills. So how could we use and complement each other? So they knew how to use bamboos, build things. So we did the first prototype. This would be the second tower that we needed. So we put it up, then put it down. Okay, the signal is working, and then we built a real tower. So now this is the configuration, so you have an idea. That's the university. The first tower in the middle is the one that was there already. And at the same time, I found two students, Lorena and Moacir, the one that are standing up. They would like to pass the knowledge. So they teach these members of the communities. In the middle, you can see the two girls, they're Bia and Elaine. Kaká and Po, Bia and Elaine, they are the people that work and they are resilient. And if it was not them, the community network would not be working. They also defend their homes by the roads and also power lines that people would like to put there, because it's in the middle of the forest and they think no one is there, but they defend their homes. I would like just to read something, because it's the last slide, and I don't want to miss anything that I want to say. So I think that my work shows me how technology can help to boost this resilience. It shows me that technology and culture can work side by side to achieve great things, and it shows me how research can make a difference. I don't think my grandma would ever imagine how strongly she influenced my path when telling me about her life in the jungle. As much as she made me value formal education for the sacrifice she made, she also made me hate it because she left her way of life for one that she thought was superior. I advocate for the combination of formal education and traditional knowledge so we can actually enrich our different worlds. Thank you.